want to know how to create really epic, transformative team experiences that not only leave your team buzzing with energy, but actually with actionable, tangible outcomes and actions that are going to drive and transform their results. Well, in today's episode, I am joined by the wonderful Briony McKenzie, CEO, leadership and event expert, who shares her top insights on how you can craft transformative team events. And we don't just stop there, we talk leadership, strategic decision-making, effective team management, and how you can drive results through those magic moments that you bring your teams together. Let's dive right in. So welcome to the Ultimate Offsite. Today is a particularly special episode as I am so excited to be joined by the wonderful Briony McKenzie. Has had such a huge impact in my life over the last 2.5 years. She is has been one of my business mentors, holding me through the building of Pop. And it is just such a privilege to be able to spend a little bit of time having this wonderful conversation. We're going to be talking about offsites. We're going to be talking about how to run events. We're going to be talking about leadership, management, mindset as a leader. So huge welcome, Briony. It's great to have you. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you, Chloe, for the opportunity to join you today and have this profound conversation. And obviously, it's been such a privilege to be part of your entrepreneurial journey and see the huge impact that you're creating in your work and to be a little part of that. So thanks for having me here.
It's a really special time. So I'm coming to the end. I'm in the last couple of weeks of a mastery or Briony's mastery program, which I've been in for the last 12 months, but she's been supporting me for the last 2.5 years. And it really does feel like such a wonderful time to be able to have this conversation. Briony, perhaps you want to kick us off with a little bit about you, what you do at Untapped, a little context for anyone who's watching.
Of course. My name's Briony McKenzie. I am a co-founder of a company called Untapped, and we work across a global international team supporting what we consider and call evolutionary experts, right? So these are people who are incredibly talented in their industries, in their niches as practitioners, trainers, coaches, and we support them to actualize their dreams in terms of their business and help them build, grow, and then scale what they do. What that means is we use systems and mindset training and leadership development to really help make their life easier and help things come into fruition. So that's a little bit about what we do at Untapped. How I actually ended up here, well, I was actually a top tier corporate lawyer for almost 3.5 years. Basically, the whole time I knew it wasn't what I wanted to do. I just didn't know how to figure out what I wanted to do, which is where I started seeking answers, going to lots of seminars, listening to lots of interviews and podcasts just like this one, and just really absorbing wisdom. And I realized that I was nowhere near in alignment with who I really was at my core. My biggest values were growth and contribution. And so I worked with some amazing coaches to actually transition my entire career into the coaching industry. And over years, I did a lot of personal transformation programs, built a lot of communities around that, and then started to see that a lot of these really talented people in corporate typically wanted to create something of their own, but business was really hard. And so now we get to support those people to make those a reality, because I quickly realized I wasn't going to be able to impact the whole world with my skill set. And in fact, not everyone's going to be able to hear or resonate with me. So we need more thought leaders. We need more creators. So I get to be part of supporting that journey for people.
Yeah, and it's been such a privilege, as I say, to be part of that. And the way that you support founders, new entrepreneurs coming through and coming out of that space is so diverse. So there's a combination of coaching, a spot of one-on-one, depending on a lot of group coaching. But one of the things that I was most curious about bringing you on today to talk about was events. So actually, throughout the last number of years, I have attended so many events that you and your wonderful partner in life and in business, Delaney, have put on together. Primarily, you're virtual. which is a really difficult thing to do. Some of them have been 5-day business mastery events, 8 hours a day of a lot of content, but a lot of realizations and huge transformation out of the back of them, on life and wealth mastery events, even a relationship mastery events. And I'm curious because one of the key elements of any manager or leader's role is to find those moments to bring their teams together, but actually to help them get out of the day to day and help them take that step back, the balcony view versus being on the dance floor view. And events can be a really good moment to be able to do that. So I was curious about what led you to decide to put on these events, and what, from your perspective, do they look like when they're done well?
Beautiful. I think you touched on it actually. You kind of answered it within that as well. Is that what led to the events is that over time in personal transformation or business mentorship, or when you're managing and leading people, you're kind of managing these consistent playbooks or accountability structures or recurring things that help build the habits in the day to day of your team, for us, our students as well. And that's wonderful, that's critical. But that also means that things can get monotonous. And how do you actually inject inspiration and create literally new neural pathways for people? How do you shift their thinking and have them see that bird's eye view? Just as you said, events are such a profound and easy way to do that. Not easy, but a really impactful way to do that for the input. So what I really love to think about, and particularly with how we do events, is that as you kind of identified, they are really immersive. So, what we consider with events and something to really think about is that it's not just taking someone away for 2 hours out of their day. What we tend to do is create almost a virtual room or experience where the day to day of people's lives disappears a little bit.
Mm.
And it's like, you're here, everything else you worry about every day, the washing, picking up the kids, whatever, it disappears. And actually, you just get to be fully here in this moment and focused on what you need to focus on. Now, people create different connections and thoughts when that happens. So, really thinking about that immersive ability, take you out of your life. You meet a little bit of resistance sometimes. People are like 5 days from 8 till 8, or so. You get that initial kickback. But after the events or the experiences, people are like, wow, I just learned and discovered what could have taken me 3 years in 3 days. So that's the power of them. You get this compact timeline, this compact learning. The brain operates differently because of the structure of it. So that's really why we incorporate them. And with our touch on some of our events is we don't do the stock standard stuff that we're doing in the trainings, right? Or the day-to-day programs, because they're a chance to do something really different. So with our entrepreneurs, we do wealth and relationships and these other skills that they're probably not going to get in the day-to-day element of their student experience, or for those managing teams, the day-to-day operations of your team. So really also thinking about the lens of like, what other skill sets or mindsets could I contribute to my team that they're not going to get doing their day-to-day playbooks and operations? And that's how we think about our events, is like, that's what makes them, I would say, so unique, is they are a little bit adjacent to what the students are doing. And I think that's really powerful with your team, is like, can you give them an experience that they're not going to find anywhere else in their role through this event?
Yeah, I think that's such a brilliant point. And because it doesn't come naturally, you know me very well. I am all in and I absolutely love work. I love everything that I'm creating. If I didn't know better, I would spend most of my waking hours work, 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 work. But part what has been incredibly powerful is like, actually, when you have a different perspective, your relationship, for instance, has a huge impact in the way, if you've got challenges going on in your romantic relationship, that can cause real changes the way that you show up at work. The same with your health. Like, we all learned within the pandemic the importance of health and how that is primary, but it's beyond that. It's like actually the energy. It's not just base level health, but actually, what if you can hack your own energy so that you can be even more productive and enjoy it even more? So much of what can see, and I see this a lot with teams where they're like, oh, it's just fluffy, well-being fluffy or something else. Actually, what, the happier and the more energized your team are, the more they
Yep.
feel cared about as a whole human rather than just the work Chloe, the better that they're going to show up completely differently. And so being conscious around, well, what are those elements that you want to incorporate? Or where are those
Yep.
different components that you want to help the team shift into? How can you use an immersive experience in order to incorporate that? I think is such a brilliant framing. Where did it come from? You've been on great events in the past, or you've been role modeled, and that's actually how a lot of leaders learn how to put
For
on
sure.
events, is by seeing what good looks like elsewhere. I'm curious, what are some great events that you have learnt from and taken inspiration from?
For sure. I think that's really important to acknowledge, is that we're standing on the shoulders of giants, of people that have done these industries and created profound impact in the world through their events. And I've been privileged enough to be a student of so many, right? So I think it is important to go and experience it, to then be able to pull from it and filter it through your own value system and curate your own vision of what you want to build. So I had my original training, I went through landmark education. The design of their events is, I would almost consider, like sterile. Like the design is to keep it very clean and very focused. So I learned like start dates, start times, critical, break times, like clarity on the schedule. Like they run like an amazing operation that for me led to like the clarity of like what we're working on, break times, like not just randomly letting things unfold. There's a little bit of that, but there also has to be a lot of like proper planning and thought. Through Tony Robbins, right? We went through the Tony Robbins University. I know you've done a bunch of his trainings as well. I think he would be considered one of the world's best events trainers, like events facilitators, in this space of the impact he's had and how many lives he's changing in one room. From that, I got like energy is critical, right? So I had been in training rooms where dance, music, sound, body, like none of that was really prioritized. It was all cognitive training. And then experiencing his events, it was like, wow, we need to bring the physical body online, use music, use play, use like energy generation, use hydration, these things to actually keep people's physical well-being so they can be present in the event. And then I went into Alexi Panos and Preston Smiles trainings, their leadership trainings, and they're a lot more transformative, using community, using breakout room, using, I'd say, more experimental style. Like we're not just going to learn some cognitive distinction that's like a slide deck. We're going to then apply it and put you in breakout rooms, and you're going to go out in the street and test this. And then I learned that total experimental application. So I think in all of these, and my NLP and hypnosis training was all in physical in Australia as well. I would fly from New Zealand. So every single piece, I feel it was like pulling little parts that we loved and leaving parts that maybe we didn't think resonated or would work for our community. So I think going to things is actually one of the best things you can do.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
and also bringing in conscious awareness. That is the way that a lot of leaders will pull together events or offsites. They'll look at the experiences that they've had in the past and pick from it, jigsaw piece together bits and parts that they've liked. But what I'm hearing from you is this real level of, how do you match that with your values, or what the audience needs in that time, what the participants need in those moments? And I've experienced that. There's been moments where it's been appropriate to have training style. There's been moments where it's been incredibly valuable to go off and do role plays, as an
Yeah.
example, a sales call role play, and use breakout rooms for that. So really being conscious of what are you trying to create, and what tool from your toolkit or from what you've seen role modeled elsewhere could be valuable, or who else might you bring in. So again, something that you've used or have experienced is where you bring in guest experts, is someone else who is really great on a particular topic that's going to be particularly useful for the participants, bringing that in as
I think
well.
that's huge. It's like know your parameters. When you're an event facilitator, curator, visionary, whatever you consider yourself, leader, you don't have to do it all. And I think for many years I did probably think we did. And then it was really realizing like on for us, just a context example, we bring in some breathwork facilitators and trainers who do more meditative and nervous system regulation. That's not my particular zone of genius. However, and it is kind of a critical or something I think that the students would really benefit from. So perfect, bring them in and don't feel like you have to do everything, but curate that space. And it is always knowing your audience. I think there's a really balance of, you don't want the event to be exactly what people do every day. Otherwise, it's not interesting and there's not much growth in it. But you need to know your community. Having come from corporate, I knew how to dance the lines of what was deemed appropriate, or you don't want to go too edgy, but you also want people to grow. So don't be afraid if you're in a corporate environment and, well, in our day to day, we don't do meditation, but I do know it's a fundamental skill that as a leader I use in my life. Okay, bring in a facilitator and give them a little experience of it and see how it resonates. So I think there is a balance of bringing enough things that are edgy and give some growth to the team, and also reading the room and making sure it still fits the brand and the values of what you do. But I do think there are a chance to try new things, and you should be brave to bring some interesting people in.
Yeah. And again, that point that you make there, it doesn't have to just be all on your shoulders. You can add variety and clarity, take a little bit of pressure off yourself by getting some support or getting consciously thinking about who are the right people to come in at the specific moments in there.
And choosing those guest people, all you want to do is make sure you brief them in the vision and the values of the event, and they'll be on a similar tune. You know, always get it perfect, but yeah, just like briefing them. When we want people to leave this event, we want them to feel X, Y, and Z. Our values of this event are ABC, so that when they come in, it's not so jarring. They step into this created context. So
Yeah,
yeah,
yes, please. I cannot tell you the number of times that I've been invited to deliver a workshop as part of a wider day, and there's been no
yeah,
introduction to me. Chloe, take over. And it's
yeah,
been on me to create the context for why we're here. And a lot of the room have sat there going, what is going on? I think there is a role of not just abdicating your responsibility as a leader from its entirety, but actually setting the context, really setting the room up for success and being like, I have specifically chosen to bring in Bryony or Chloe because X, Y, and Z. And
yeah,
this is how it fits into the wider context of what we're doing here. And this is why it's relevant. And the wrap up as well, rather than just, right. Because I don't care. I can hold that space, but it's more for the benefit of those that you are holding or hosting as overall from a leadership position. I think that's really important.
for sure. Yeah.
One of the things that you've touched on there, particularly when you were mentioning the kind of Tony Robbins experience, is energy. Like he is a master of managing energy. I have been in 80-hour trainings with Tony Robbins, virtual in the middle of the night, where they've started at 4 p.m. and finished at 8 a.m. And as you say, high energy. And it's incredible how he's able to create an environment that instills this. And you talked to some of it there around kind of the use of music and physical movement, and even something as simple as water, being hydrated. It's amazing how different that is. I've got my water here.
Yeah.
It is amazing the impact that water can have. But I'm curious around kind of thinking not only as of our events with a kind of time management lens, but also an energy management lens. I'm curious about your perspective around that.
Yeah. Those practical tidbits like keeping people hydrated, people get absorbed into the events and they're not in their day to day life. So you've got to remember you've taken out all their day to day cues of habits they typically do. So be responsible for that. If you're asking them to sit there for 12 hours, they could sit there like this. It's like, cool, I've taken out that they go to the gym or they drink when they go to the toilet, they have a drink when they go to the bathroom, or like they don't have those. So you kind of have to be the person who reminds them, now we eat, now we drink, because you've removed all those cues. That's a very practical thing, but also very important. So we tend to have a water, like literally a hydration, a water bottle, or like a image of water on the slide deck. Every little session that ends, it's like, remember to hydrate. And literally, sometime one of the feedback from one person was like, just loved the hydration prompt. They were great. And we were like, just found that so funny. But she actually really appreciated having that reminder because she doesn't drink much water in a day. So that's a really practical element. One other kind of practical thing when you were talking, and then I'll bring in one distinction that's really helpful. But one other practical component is creating of what you're also asking of your attendees. So, for example, I've been at trainings where they use a particular song, right? This is something that is called neuroassociative conditioning. It's what Tony Robbins trains people in. He uses these power move, pretty intense, make your move things that he just imbues into people's bodies. Some trainings I've been at, they'll use a particular song. I can never hear Happy by Pharrell again because I heard it so many times in this 18-day training, and it would be like we'd all get up and dance. But so what you want to think about at the start of your event is, maybe is there one song, one way, one word that we will keep coming back to, that is maybe get up from your seat and stretch or take big breaths, and just using it repetitively is probably the best thing as a little energy reset. And then the hydration. Those two are just going to take care of basic fundamentals. But at a macro level, when you're thinking about the actual flow of your content, the actual energy in the room, one of the best distinctions we've ever used is, basically, there's a guy called Frederick Dodson. He writes books essentially on consciousness, really, reality creation and consciousness. One of his key distinctions is called the levels of consciousness. There's multiple levels, but he distills these into energy fields effectively. When you're thinking about frequency of different people's energies, where they're at, he puts into three key categories. One is what's called willful action energy. Get it done, get in a breakout room, do your reflection now, something to do, right? A lot of the world operate from that energy field in their day to day, but we can touch on each one. One is willful, one is intellectual, head, cognitive, spreadsheets, systems, learning, frameworks, intellectual, turning my brain on, and one is intuitive, flow, touch with my body, hypnosis, meditation, softer things, right? Movement, talking to a person beside you, all more intuitive, just a softer energy, nothing to achieve, nothing to do, just to be in a space. So when you think about your event, the best thing you can do within a day, within a session, you can use this distinction, micro and macro. So within one really good session, to touch each of these levels, because then you're speaking to your whole audience. You're incorporating everyone who operates at different things, and you've also got a good variety. So when people wonder why they enjoy our session, it's because we'll teach some intellectual things, right? We might start with a short meditation, intuitive, teach an intellectual framework, the 5 ways to increase your sales, intellectual. Now do your reflection questions and then talk to the person next to you, willful. So if you are thinking about your event in a session and also across a whole day, you cannot cram a day of just intellectual. You're going to lose half your audience. You can't just do some intuitive, vibey stuff and give no one any cognitive, get things done energy. So when you think about that, think about your whole days or your multiple days or even your sessions. You can use that framework across the whole thing, and it's going to help the energy of the event just flow, and people won't even know why, right? It'll just feel good. They'll be like, oh, I love that bit and I love that bit. And you're going to include everyone and manage the energy, basically.
Yeah, I love that. For me, there's a real distinction around conscious inclusion, like actually being conscious in that way. Some people operate very high on the kind of intellectual, that's their preference, right? They'll be on the intellectual, they will love university lectures. That would probably be
Yeah.
me. But actually, how do you include the person who's just raring to get something done or wants to feel like they're doing something practical with that willful energy? I think that's really important. Is often a kind of pitfall that I see that happens is just where, again, the leader puts so much on themselves where they just talk at an audience and there isn't that interaction, participation. They haven't consciously thought about that, or they just want to add so much value and they care so much and they want to leave you with so many things. And I've definitely done this in the past where I've just information overload coming from an amazing place of caring and wanting to add as much value as you can, but actually not leaving the space for more reflection or the so what or the interaction between participants. Talk to me a little bit about how you guys go about thinking consciously around that engagement and the participation and that interaction part.
Yeah, I think it's been a lesson and a learning for us as well. Got to remember that whatever you're facilitating on, You facilitate, it's your bread and butter often. You do it every day, all day. It's not new to you. We've found that people probably need 2 times, maybe even 3 times more space, conversation. That's kind of my rule of thumb, is if I thought it would take people need 5 minutes to complete the questions, they're going to need 10 to 12. That's expanding your thinking on that, because you are familiar with your content. You've been practicing it. You run it all day. It's your thing. So I would just have a 2x rule, as like, we're going to need 2 times more integration. We call it integration space. Integration, it's not just the learning bit, it's the application integration, letting it really land in people's minds, really apply it to their own life. It's called integration. It's something I think that a lot of events actually don't do well, is like creating enough space for integration. It is what will probably 10x your event, literally, because it's going to create stronger synapses in the brain. People are going to create that connection with people, which is going to strengthen what they've learned. Oh, yes, when I talk to Chloe about this thing and Michael about that thing, that's right. That's what they'll remember, right? So really realizing, thinking about it almost distinctly from your intellectual content to integration time, and then 2xing how much time you give people, and have a list of how you do it, right? We might just say something at the end of every session. We do this. What was your biggest takeaway from this
Yeah.
session? We do it at the end of every session. And then we have a quick conversation, 5 minutes. That's an integration time. Have a break, come back. And we just put that in. So just allowing enough reflection and really prioritizing sharing with people, sharing your biggest insights, and Q&A.
I love that. The integration piece, I think, is a great. There's 3 I's for the ultimate offsite 3 I formula. So the first one is around intention. Who are you doing it and creating it for? Why are you doing it? And therefore, what are you going to do and where you do it? The second component is around that I call interaction, and how do you actually promote that participation and engagement. I love that distinction added into that interaction phase of the integration. How are you going to embed the purpose, activate that intention, which leads on to the final I, which is the implementation, which again,
Um,
integration is absolutely critical for, because it's helping consolidate individuals' key takeaway. What is the insight that you're taking away from this? And then what's the one action that you're going to do differently? So I'm curious, Untapped is so great at that implementation, what I would call an implementation phase, with lots of kind of accountability systems and processes there. The value of an event, especially if you're going to spend 5 days together, or even day of your whole team, getting that out of everyone's, it's a big time investment. It's so worth it only if you go and do something different as a result of it. So I'm curious around that perspective in terms of the implementation. What tips or recommendations do you have, or perspective might you be able to share?
Yeah, I love that you touch on this. Again, I think this is why people maybe don't invest in events, because they don't always see the return because of the lack of this piece. And that's why what you're doing with the Ultimate Offsite is so incredibly valuable, to create that intentionality and actually leverage and get 10x your return on that time, because it is a lot of time and it is a lot of energy, and you want to get that back. So when we think about implementation, for us, I think you touched on it as well. Everyone is going to actually get something quite different from the event. You have your intention, you have what you're creating as part of your method as well, right? As the leader, you have this focus, but realizing that everyone is actually going to get something a little bit different. You need to make sure they know what that was as well, right? So really, when they leave, they have this document of their key insights. And one thing we get our students to do at an event is, in the back of their workbook, so front of the workbook, maybe you provide something they can actually take notes in as well, but then in the back, it's your implementation plan. Every idea you have, and this is great for the willful people as well, every action you realize when you're listening to the speaker, you think, oh my gosh, I could do that in my team. I could set that system up tomorrow. You put it in your implementation plan. So then everyone actually leaves the event with this physical representation of the changes they're going to go away and make. And we literally give a blueprint for it. It's like task, impact of doing this task, right? Time this task will take, value it provides, and then like deadline. So we give them that, not just a whole bunch of ideas, because you do risk overwhelm when you information load and you don't help people synthesize, not relevant for me, oh, very important for me, make action. Like, you have to be responsible to help them do that. And that's why with Ultimate Offsite, that's what you're helping people really extract and get that value. So we provide that template. We prompt in every session, hey, now you've got your insights, go to your implementation plan, put down your actions. At the end of our events, we then do, for the last like 40 minutes before we do like celebration kind of wrapping up, we do like a 40-minute breakout rooms, kind of conversating. Are you clear on your implementation plan? What's the top 3 priorities? Put them in your calendar now. So we take some space to loop back to it to validate the importance of that. And then, of course, post event check ins, right? So if you're running a team, how are you going to then manage those actions? How are you going to support your team to make those happen? Because they might be big, lofty ideas or goals. Is there going to be a meeting about those? Is there going to be a 30-day call to check in with everyone post event? How can people be supported to implement those? So I think that's kind of it, is give them the implementation blueprint, have a time in the event where you really like land in it, go over it, and then make sure you have a follow-up structure to loop back to it. Otherwise, none of that's probably going to get done.
Yeah, so valuable. And I think it can be even more important when you do this as a team. So, actually, a lot of the events that I've been to in the past, offsite events, team events, the team have come up with great ideas or action plans, or there was a lot of brilliant stuff that came up in the room, yet there wasn't a what are we committing to? And even if you can create space inside the event to actually prioritize of all these amazing things that have been suggested and come up, what are we aligning to as a team? Like, what are we committing to as a team? And then who's responsible for that? When are we going to check in, as you say? When have we got those things in the diary? What exactly? You don't need to necessarily know the how, because that can be worked out later on, but what's going to shift, how are we going to measure success, those sorts of things are absolutely critical, and often not enough time and space is left for it. And so even as a participant, it's been frustrating. We did some really great stuff in there, but did anything happen as a result? No.
Yep. And you're bang on there. Is like the criticalness for a team environment is even 10x, because when you walk out the door of that event or you close the Zoom room, what do? You open your email, you open your Slack, Instagram, and your whole life. You reintegrate into your whole world, and then all of that takes priority. So I think what you just said then is really important to emphasize is don't leave it until Monday or Thursday's meeting next week, because everyone's back into the swing, email, calendar, everything's full, right? Do it at the event. I think that's such great advice, because that's going to mean it gets scheduled and it gets a priority. Otherwise, it's kind of like, oh, that cute thing we said in an event and no one ever did. And if you're a leader, I was just talking to our new operations manager about this morning at Untapped, is it's unbelievably demotivating for your team to come up with ideas, to get really excited by it, and then to never see them come to fruition. There's nothing more demotivating, and that would have a team feel like they don't care, because that's their ideas. That's what they want out of the workplace. That's what they're excited to implement. You've kind of got that amazing leverage that if they've generated these ideas, they're going to be more responsible for them, and then you're just not helping implement them. So really, like, my experience with team is like that is huge and really demotivating if not done. So you probably have a negative impact if you literally don't help with the implementation.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And also, you know what? It's a lot of pressure that's being put on the leader. If you're going out for drinks straight
Yeah.
after, you've got to come back to that on Monday. Actually, so much more efficient to get it done in the room, but also then it's not on your shoulders to be the one who's making decisions around what of has come up is the priority. You're actually doing that in context with everyone else, and you maintain the integrity of making sure it's seen through, again, by assigning who's responsible. And it doesn't have to just be you. If you've given clear accountability or clear responsibility on someone else, they are then empowered to be able to go and see this through, which is much more motivating.
Yes, please. Yes.
So much more
Yeah.
motivating.
Yeah.
Well, we could talk about events all day, but I am really curious then to kind of shift into, you have got so much gold and wisdom around leadership and management in terms of the practical tools and tips that you have in managing a team. And actually, I've managed a team since I was 19. I wish I had some of the practices that you put in with the team that you run and your processes there. So I did want to make sure that we allow some space to have some conversation around that, because it comes into that follow through as well. I think it links really nice to the day-to-day running and making sure that a team is supported and set up systematically in order to succeed, and the individuals within that. Do you have a perspective on that? Where would you like to start?
Well, I think what you touched on is really awesome. It's like that the day to day environment for your team is absolutely fundamental. And sadly, most people kind of operate in chaos, to be honest. I don't think like have put enough intentionality and time into creating that amazing system for your team. And if you want better productivity, you want better output, you want better team culture, like setting up the foundations and the systems in the beginning is what creates that context for people. And then the events become a true amplifier. If they go back to their day to day and they haven't got clear systems, none of that's going to happen. So I think the way you framed it is bang on. We need to create the day to day context. And our philosophy that consists of almost two parts, really. When you think about systems in a team, we throw around that word a lot, myself included. You're thinking about the day to day processes that they use, like playbooks, operating procedures, processes. And then the other side of systems is really the communication frameworks, is how do we communicate to each other? What language do we use? How do we give feedback? When I'm working and helping entrepreneurs scale and implement procedures or systems, it sits in those parts. As your team need to have really clear communication frameworks and then also really clear playbooks and operating systems. And that just saves time and energy and clarity. And that creates culture, cohesion, motivation, right? They're both really, really important.
Yeah, I'm particularly curious around the communication frameworks and some of those practices. If you reflect on one member of your team as an example, what might that look like for you at Untapped with one individual within the team?
Yeah, we do use quite a lot of profiling tools. Not a lot of profiling tools, but like profiling. And what I mean by that is personality assessments, profiling assessments, more to truly understand each person, really. So when someone comes into our team, they'll do Clifton Strengths profile and maybe a Colby Index, depending on kind of where they sit. And we'll know what their love language is. So how they love to receive feedback and acknowledgement. Is it words? Is it bonuses? How do they actually receive recognition? Because not every person's the same. So when someone joins our team, we'll have their profiles and then they'll also complete what's called a user manual. So our user manual, we have this template in our SOP that every new team member will complete. It's a self-reflection, who they fundamentally are as a person. What's their zones of genius? What's their zones of incompetence? When do they like to work? What's the greatest achievements in their life? How do they like to get feedback? What hours do they work online and prefer meetings? And it's this whole basically run through of how to work with me, who I am and how to work with me. So every team member has a user manual and then we have their profiles. And when you're new to the team, so you actually set up a meeting to introduce yourself to the team, take them through your user manual. So it's like, hey, this is kind of how I roll and this is a bit about who I am and how to get the best out of me, basically. The name explains it, right? A user manual. It's like, how to use
I
Brighty.
love it so much.
Yeah. So it's pretty cool. And then people can ask questions and then really know how to work with each other. And that basis as the beginning is really important to get that person. And then we start to really integrate them into the culture and our frameworks and things. But I think people overstep that bit and expect people to just assimilate into a culture. And of course, there's team culture. But if you honestly want a thriving team, you have to understand each person at a not just their role, at a personal level. So I really love it. And I think it makes people feel really seen when they start a role and it's like, wow, they really care about me and my goals and my love language. And that's kind of one thing that I think is fun that I would do with every team.
100%. And there's so much value as well in the sharing of that and having that bird's eye view at a total team of where are the strengths. If we look at Gallup's as an example, or Gallup strengths, so there's four different categories of expertise. Is my team high in strategic thinking, or are they influencing? And it then enables you all to collectively understand who's going to be best placed to be able to support on this, or what strengths can they lean on in order to get this project over the line or manage workload or roles and responsibilities that can be built on a strengths-based culture is incredibly profound. And I love the use of love languages there too, because for anyone who's not familiar, words of affirmation might be one as an example, gifts, and we are different. The way that we want to be recognized could be very different. And so therefore understanding your team, helping your team understand each other. And again, offsites can be an amazing opportunity for the team to get to know each other on a different level as well. So beyond you as a leader or a or your line managers knowing their direct reports, how do you help the individuals with team members within the team understand themselves better in a
Yeah.
context that where it's not an average day conversation for most
Yeah.
people that they say learner and activator and my key strengths and this is how you're going to get the most out of me. This is my user manual. I love it so
Yeah.
much.
And the love languages, it's probably more used in personal transformation worlds, but it does translate quite easily to a work environment. It's a free quiz that your team member can do, and it'll just help you identify basically on a more corporate level how to incentivize them. You could be paying people bonuses that they literally couldn't care less about, right? You could just send them a card and say, you're amazing, and it'll create 10x an impact for them. So that's really understanding how to incentivize each person. And I recently did some mentorship with a small kind of a team of about 6 females, and I was working with the CEO, and then we did do the Gallup Strengths Profile, and it was amazing facilitating the session at an offsite. And it was like some of the team, they didn't realize there was someone in the team who had amazing ideation, and she was always coming up with a million ideas. She's the only person in that small team who had high ideation. Everyone else had high execution. And everyone was like, oh my gosh, like, you're our problem solver. I'm stuck on this thing. I need more help with ideas. Suddenly there was this flow of collaboration that had never ever been established because there wasn't language and there wasn't awareness. So you start to drive a team that can also collaborate without you and lead from really high self-awareness, which is cool.
Yeah, and it's leaning into their energy. You talked about the zone of genius. If ideation is in her zone of genius, if that is what gives her energy and what comes naturally to her, how can you set her up for success so that she can be using that whilst helping the team? It's shifting that team from just kind of like performing to being really thriving or a high performing team. Incredibly powerful. I'm curious, we talked a little bit in terms of offsites being an opportunity to step out of the day to day and more on taking a balcony view. What moments within an annual calendar for Untapped would you take out to get clear on strategy, or do you have an intentionality around when you go about doing that? Is it your quarterly? What does that look like? How do you take the team on that journey too?
Yeah, so we did some digital, even just the end of the year being, we did some digital kind of reflection sessions that were more like just truly reflection, no planning, just really getting the wisdom of how's the year been, what did we achieve, how do we enjoy it, and celebrate it as well. And that was a really helpful process. And within that, we kind of did this like 10x thinking, like, okay, if we look at not into quarterly planning kind of level, but just vision. Okay, if we think about the team we want to become, what we want to achieve in each department this year, and we all just ideated and really got on board with that kind of energy. So what's exciting about that is the team are inspired and they're also part of where the company's going. So that was really fun. We did that at the end of last year, and then it's kind of on us as CEO and with the ops manager to turn that into quarterly plans and actually schedule that into tasks and into projects. So that's a little bit how we keep our team with the vision. One other kind of element that we always do, our weekly team meeting, we actually read the company vision, right? So at the start of every meeting, because why? Because some of that meeting is data reporting. You could say that's quite boring, but what is the context of where we're going, and are we continually establishing that? I think too many people leave this stuff to one-off things.
Yeah.
So again, in the offsite, for example, if you're going to draft a vision statement as a company or 2024 vivid vision or whatever it is, how are you going to integrate that into the day-to-day operations of the business? So for us, there's a different kind of roster, one person each time. We'll read the company vivid vision, who we are as a company, why do we exist? Then another person will read one of the company values, and then we'll all share how we've seen that value embodied this week, or maybe we were not integrating it. That puts the vision value stuff that's always left last minute, put in a document and never used, into the company of the culture. And then we go into data reporting, right? I would say we've more kept that vision alive ongoingly throughout the year, not just this kind of one-time thing. However, a lot of the thinking and the ideation and stuff is done in those immersive events. And then we're really looking at, right, how are we revisiting this every week?
Yeah, I love that. And I've used that same structure within my own team. So we take it in turns, the team takes it in turns to read out the mission statement. Every month, we'll rate ourselves on how we're living each and every one of the values so that it's not just words on a wall or a one time thing that we were aspiring to at this event where we had loads of energy. Actually, it lives and breathes, and we reflect on, are we actually doing that? Is that still relevant? And then what would measures of success look like against that? And we track those. So those are all tools and systems that I've learned from you guys and super powerful. I'm conscious of time, and we could speak for
We could. We
hours,
could.
and there is just so much, so many gems that will come out of it. I guess I want to leave some space if there's anything that you think we haven't touched on or you think is particularly important from the conversation to double click on. Where would you like to leave this conversation? What parting words might you have for those who are listening?
We've covered a lot. And the main thing is that it's not all on you, right? As a leader, you're not expected to know all of this. I'll be honest, I'm the first to admit I'm a great leader. I'm a terrible manager. I am an awful manager. I'm like, oh, yes, performance reviews. We should do those. And my team manage me sometimes, right? So I'm a wonderful leader. I love setting context. I love creating visions. I love developing people. But when it comes to management, I know that's a blind spot for me. I'm not that skilled at it. And it's a work on. So the biggest thing is really that you're not meant to know how to do all this, and you don't even have to do it all. And it's why I love what you're building, Chloe, with the ultimate offsite, is that you're there to support people in that. And it's why I love what I get to do. I remember crying in my car so many times about being a terrible leader, right? And I wasn't a bad leader. I just didn't have the skills. I didn't know how to manage people. I didn't know how to hire. And that's why I love helping people like you support and learn those skills, because once you learn them, it's easy. So my kind of final message is that it's not all on you. However, you do have some level of the responsibility. So be willing to get the support you need, be willing to listen to things like this, to learn, and be the first to admit that you don't really know what you're doing and that you can figure it out. That's probably my main piece. I think a lot of leaders try to save face and look good and pretend they have it figured out. And it's okay that you don't. The amazing skill of you is that you can figure it out and you do have resources and you can learn quickly. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Thank you so much for this conversation. For the past 2.5 years, I know that there's
Pleasure.
many
It's an
more to
absolute
come.
pleasure. You are the best person ever to coach. And I just love what you're building. And I'm so excited to continue to see the impact that it's making as well.
Thank you so much for all your support, and we'll speak soon.
Awesome. Thank you.
And that is a wrap, my friends, on today's conversation. Hope you found it useful. And for more tips on how to unlock the potential within you, but also within your team, please hit subscribe. There'll be more videos coming your way. Until then, I'm Chloe Temple, helping you ignite the offsite advantage at your next team event. See you soon.